This will be a quick one, I guess, although time remaining says 45 minutes, that's obviously a leftover. Profiling applications. So a lot of times you think, Flow, yeah, that's cool, but it's so slow, I can't even drink that much coffee all day. So, but that's actually, you need some way to find out what part is actually slow. Is it slow really, and what is it that is slow? Is it some external request? Is it my code? Is it the bootstrap of the application, of the framework? So you might have heard of Plumber and PHP Profiler, two packages that were created by Sebastian Kurfürst sometime last year, if I remember right. So, and what they do is PHP Profiler just encapsulates XHProf, a tool made by a small company doing a social network site called Facebook. And Plumber is the front end for visualizing that data. So, a few of the features of that package. You can, of course, get a number of metrics. This looks quite boring for most of the graphs, like this one, because yeah, it has some entries here, runtime of 25 seconds, there's only a few, and then there's a lot of runs that have a quite short runtime. You can see the number of object creations graphed over the number of runs that match that. So this gives you an overview of the application's diversity throughout the runs, what you get there. This is probably more useful for a live server to spot, this sometimes happens that it takes longer or eats more memory, we need to investigate. All the data is collected from profiling runs that are recorded through script execution, and you can tag them freely in this interface. So you can organize them to compare them later and to sort of organize what you want to know. Controller name is there, and then some metrics again, number of method calls, number of object creations, and more. If you want to know more about the details, because as you see that you have some number here, like, yeah, with 1,400 object creations, approximately. You can hover over those numbers and you will get a pop-up showing you more, the top 10 of the items that make up those numbers. It can be very helpful to find out, okay, so the top method that is executed all the time is some method in the doctrine lexer, because we are reading annotations too often. And then you have also just the regular XHProf UI profiling data view embedded in this interface. What is unique to Plumber and not realized through XHProf is a request timeline that actually gives you an overview of the different phases of the application over time. These are the bars up there with the different colors. You can click them to actually see the exact phase identifier. So this was the Flow bootstrap while it initialized the configuration, for example. And the blue line is the memory consumption. As you can see throughout the script run, it is steadily going up. Now the good thing about this timeline is that you can use it to compare two runs. And this is a nice example. So what you see is one run at the top and one run at the bottom. And if you look closely, they have the same scale. So those two 700 millisecond marks line up. So the run at the top was at the beginning of our performance code sprint in March, and the one at the bottom is with most of the optimizations merged in the core. So there was a nice week in Kiel that we had there. Also the memory usage, if you see that, it's 11 megabytes for the post-optimization and 38 for before the optimization. Anyway, so you can actually find out if you do something to improve performance of your application, does it really help or not? And how much increase does it give you in performance, how much does it lower the memory usage, and does it speed up the application. So how to install it? First of all, you need XHProf, obviously. This is sort of easy on most Linux distributions. You have a package on the Mac. If you use Mac ports, you can just install it. On Windows, well, obviously it's also easy by now because there are packages, pre-built packages available. Although this one is recommended because it tracks the time actually, and other packages do not. I have not verified that. Then you need to install Plumber. The URLs that I have there, this is not the original Plumber by Sebastian, which you could fetch just through Composer. But this one contains more fixes and improvements that will be merged back into the original product. But if you want to see all the stuff that you see on those slides, then you need to use those forks. And this is how you can install them. Just you need to put it in your Composer manifest. You need to include the routes for Plumber, so you can actually access the profiling UI if you want that. So, but probably you will do. And then there's one cool thing about Plumber is that you can configure custom metrics. In this case, it's the number of file system calls, because we were optimizing caching, backend, and class loader, and we wanted to see how many file exists call and file open calls do we actually do during a script run. So I created this calculation rule for Plumber, which has a label and a type, and then a regular expression working on the profiling data that XHProf collects, and then in the UI you get a column saying, yeah, number of file system calls, and you can just hover over it and you see the top 10 or top 5 method calls out of that metrics group that are actually recorded. So all of this can be done with the Plumber and PHP profiler that is the stock version by Sebastian. So what is new? The standard XHProf UI is a bit, well, it could be more on the beautiful side of life. So there are a few alternative backends, or well, backend, frontend, whatever, tools to analyze data. There's two that PHP Profiler has been given support for, and one is XHProf IO, which stores the data in a MySQL database. Which doesn't necessarily make it faster than just writing a profiling array to disk, but it gives you better filtering options, for example. And then there is another, well, iteration on the original XHProf UI that stores data in MongoDB, which is also has some nice benefits. So if you want those, just go to their websites, download them, check out the README, so you configure them. In case of the XHProf IO, you need to create a database and populate it. So that's sort of completely done outside of your Flow project. And then you need to configure Plumber or PHP Profiler more specifically to use them, which you in my fork can do with those settings. For XHGui, yeah, there are some more settings that are not yet exposed here. You need to actually go into the XHGui clone or the package that you have on disk and then configure it there. But that's pretty straightforward. And then running the UIs for the MongoDB-based UI, that's really simple if you use PHP 5.4, which has a built-in web server, as you may know. All you need to do is go into the web root folder of that tool, and then you can just start up the built-in web server of PHP 5.4 and can access localhost 8080 to see the UI. For XHProf UI, it doesn't work quite as nicely because that actually wants to know a base URI in its setting, and so I find it easier to really create a virtual host for that. So what do those two new UIs look like? This is XHProf.io. Again, the graphs are for the relatively small set of profiling runs, relatively boring, but as you can see, a lot of data can be accessed there. You can also have an overview, and down there, if you could scroll on this screen, you would see all the list of runs that is there. You have also relatively, quite powerful filtering as opposed to the original UI, which is just displaying one run. And in this case, you can filter in a time range or date range. You can compare, or you can filter by host. So you can have this as a backend for multiple websites, multiple hosts, and then compare runs over different hosts if you like. So this is pretty powerful. And this is how the MongoDB-based UI by Paul Reinheimer looks like. It also has nice graphs that are relatively meaningless in this case. It's mostly the lack of data that I have. So you can also just sort, and you can have the longest, the longest running runs and the most memory consuming ones. And you can have custom views, and that is, if you have ever used MongoDB and the filtering possibilities it provides, the querying, you can use that as is. It will be given to MongoDB sort of unchanged. So whatever you can do in MongoDB when it comes to querying and filtering, XHGui can give you that data and make it into nice graphs. So that's what those two offer. And there, as I said, it's not yet merged back into the master of the original project. So there are some things up and coming. One is make the backend configuration even more accessible through the configuration as you know it in settings. I have some more ideas for things that you could configure. And then, as we've seen, those two UI tools are relatively new, and there might be even more coming in the future. So, because we have the raw data that XHProf generates, and we have that stashed away on disk, it would be cool to have a tool that you can say, okay, there's this new uber powerful XHProf analysis interface, and I just want to take that raw data and import it there. So a tool for doing that would be nice. And then what is most interesting, because it is something that XHProf was actually built for, is live monitoring. So as PHP Profiler is done now, it will profile on every request you do to your server, and that takes too long. You cannot do that on a live server, especially if you're also storing it to some MySQL database, because that again takes time, and so you will load your server pretty quickly. But it would still be interesting to have a real live metrics collection on a production site or on a suite of production servers. So the original idea behind XHProf is make it so fast and slim that you can just say, yeah, I'll leave it running, and it will profile on every 10th or 50th or 100th request and store it then. Because if you have thousands of requests every day, then just having a 1% sample is good enough to give you an overview of the overall behavior of your app. So that is something that would be coming, a production mode where you can set a possibility or a probability for dual profiling. And then, of course, this all needs to be merged back into master and polished, and then promoted, maybe. So, any questions on Plumber? Or who has used PHP Profiler and Plumber? So, oh yeah, not bad. So I guess you have found it extremely helpful already. Yeah, I hope that we can make it even more useful and put it out into the light a bit more, because it really can give you an insight on what is it that is making my application slow. Okay, thank you. That's it. And then I guess we continue with the next, and we find out what that will be. Felix Oertel, what he will tell us. I don't know yet. He seems to know, so welcome.